Have you ever wondered what happens when kindness collides with hidden power? In a bustling Olive Garden restaurant, a devoted black waitress with a heart of gold offered a helping hand to a stranger, only to be fired for it on the spot. Little did she know that this so-called stranger was an undercover CEO with the influence to turn her entire life around. Betrayals, secrets, and breathtaking revelations abound in this extraordinary story of compassion versus greed. Fasten your seatbelts for an unforgettable roller coaster ride of twists and turns where karma strikes hard and a simple act of kindness sparks a life-changing storm. The aroma of fresh breadsticks and tangy marinara lingered in the air at the Olive Garden restaurant in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was rush hour on a Friday evening. Lines stretched out the front door. Hostesses juggled phone calls and walk-ins, while servers in crisp black aprons hurried trays of sizzling pasta dishes, house salads, and steaming soups across the dining floor. A warm summer breeze breezed through the open glass doors, occasionally stirring the tension that built up during these busy nights. The restaurant was a tapestry of customers, families, celebrating birthdays, business associates, hashing out deals, and couples enjoying a night out. In the swirl of conversation and clinking glassware, one particular waitress glided from table to table with calm efficiency. Her name was Tatiana Jackson, a 26-year-old black woman with a ready smile that shone as bright as the sun. She carried herself with an unmistakable air of grace, even during the peak chaos of a busy shift. From childhood, Tatiana had believed in the power of kindness, so she made sure every customer felt valued, no matter their appearance, their order, or their status. Tatiana had worked at this Olive Garden location for over 3 years, climbing from hostess to server with consistent dedication. For her, the job was more than just a paycheck. It was a chance to connect with people, learn their stories, and make their evenings special. She thrived on those brief moments of warmth when an older couple complimented her for her gentle service, or a harried mother thanked her for going the extra mile to calm a fussy toddler. Every small gesture felt like a chance to help someone who needed a friendly face. But behind Tatiana's unwavering kindness lay a life weighted by responsibility. Back at her modest apartment, her grandmother Yvonne battled a chronic illness that required constant medication and occasional hospital visits. This grandmother had raised Tatiana from the time she was a little girl, and now Tatiana insisted on working double shifts whenever she could to cover the steep medical bills. Despite never complaining, the toll on her was obvious. Though she wore a genuine smile for her customers, shadowy circles lived beneath her eyes, reminders of the nightly worry that kept her from restful sleep. On this particular Friday night, the restaurant manager, Crystal Bowman, paced the floor with a hawk-like gaze, a no-nonsense woman in her early 40s. Crystal sported a bob of tinted blonde hair and always kept a Bluetooth earpiece attached to one ear, perpetually in conversation with corporate or other staff members. She demanded an environment where every rule was followed to the letter, from how servers presented themselves to how they dealt with undesirable guests. Crystal believed that the brand's reputation depended on absolute uniformity, and any disruption to the carefully orchestrated atmosphere threatened it. Tatiana was used to Crystal's high standards. Most nights, she managed to fly under the radar, delivering such impeccable service that there was little to criticize. But a subtle tension simmered in the air, detectable whenever the two women exchanged glances. Tatiana's moral compass didn't always align with Crystal's rigid policies, especially around how to handle customers who looked like they didn't belong in a family-friendly, polished dining environment. That night, as Tatiana balanced salads and drinks on her tray, she noticed the first stirrings of the next dramatic chapter in her life. At a table in the corner, a group of rowdy customers demanded her attention. She silently braced herself for a challenging evening, unaware that a test of her character was about to unfold. A test that would change everything for better and for worse. When Tatiana finally emerged from the kitchen, delivering a large party's meal, she spotted a figure standing hesitantly near the restaurant entrance. Tall, wearing a worn cap, tattered jacket, and scuffed-up jeans, the man looked out of place among the well-dressed patrons waiting for a table. He kept casting uncertain glances at the hostess stand, as if he wasn't sure he'd be welcomed. Tatiana felt a twinge in her chest. There was something vulnerable in that posture, like he was torn between stepping forward or turning around and leaving. Other servers bypassed him, either too busy or purposely avoiding the possibility of dealing with a homeless or disheveled individual. After all, no one wanted to risk attracting the manager's displeasure for letting in a guest who might deter paying customers. But Tatiana could not ignore it. Between serving tables, she paused and made eye contact with the man. Something about his face seemed kinder and gentler than his ragged clothing suggested. "Hello, sir," she said softly, drawing him a few steps away from the entrance. "Can I help you with anything?" The man's eyes flickered with relief. I'm not even sure if I can afford a meal here. I just needed a moment to warm up, maybe a cup of water." His voice was low, a bit hoarse. Tatiana glanced around to see if Crystal was watching. The manager was busy in the far corner, scolding a busboy for being late with clearing a table. Tatiana quickly returned her gaze to the man. "How about I seat you at one of my tables? I'll get you a glass of water and you can take a look at the menu, just in case." She expected a grateful smile, maybe a quiet nod. Instead, the man's eyes flickered with curiosity, almost as though he were analyzing her reaction. But he nodded in return. "Thank you. That's very kind." She grabbed a menu from the stand, discreetly ushered him past the waiting crowd, and guided him to a small booth near the back, away from the bustling families. People threw them quizzical stares. A child pointed in their direction, and the mother quickly pulled the child's hand down. None of it fazed Tatiana. As soon as the man sat, Tatiana poured him water, then rummaged in her apron pocket. She retrieved a gift card she had won months ago in an employee raffle for outstanding service worth about 20 US. It was intended for personal use, but she never found the time to redeem it. Now it felt like she had a higher purpose for it. Quietly, she slipped the card in front of him. "If you decide you want something to eat, use this. It might not cover everything, but it's a start," she said, giving him an encouraging smile. He blinked at the card, surprise written on his face. That's really generous, but I can't just take your gift card." "Look," she said, lowering her voice. "I don't know what your circumstances are, and I won't pry. But it's Friday night. Everyone deserves a hot meal at the end of the week." She smiled again. "I get an employee discount, so don't worry too much about it. Let's just say you'll be helping me use it up before it expires." The man hesitated, but she could see he was hungry. His eyes flickered at the mention of a hot meal. Finally, he nodded in acceptance. "Thank you. Thank you very much," he said, his voice reflecting genuine gratitude. Tatiana gave him a quick nod. "My name's Tatiana. I'll be right back to get your order." He exhaled slowly, placing the menu carefully on the table. "I'm Michael," he said quietly. "I appreciate your kindness, Tatiana." She nodded, moved away, and tried to ignore the slight tremor in her heart. There was something about Michael's demeanor that made her believe she had done the right thing. But that same moral conviction also reminded her of the risk. If Crystal found out that she had seated and potentially served a man who looked homeless without explicit permission, there would be trouble. Yet Tatiana knew in her heart some rules were meant to be bent for the sake of genuine kindness. Throughout the evening, Tatiana juggled her regular tables and discreetly tended to Michael's needs. She refilled his water, encouraged him to pick out a hearty meal, and even snuck an extra breadstick basket onto the table. He ended up ordering a simple bowl of spaghetti with meat sauce and aside salad items that remained within the gift card's limit. But as she delivered his food, the moment she'd been dreading finally arrived. From across the restaurant, Tatiana felt the piercing gaze of Crystal Bowman. She saw the manager weaving through the busy floor, zeroing in on the booth where Michael quietly ate. When Crystal caught Tatiana's eye, she gave her a sharp, questioning glance. Tatiana felt her stomach flip. She hurried to another table of diners who needed drink refills, hoping to avoid the confrontation until she could gather her composure. Eventually, there was no escape. Crystal cornered Tatiana near the server's station. Her posture was tense, arms folded tightly over her chest. "What's going on with the man in the back booth?" Tatiana took a breath, forcing a calm expression. He's a customer like anyone else. He was seated, ordered food, and now he's enjoying his meal. Crystal's lips thinned. "I see. And who authorized that?" "Because I don't recall instructing the hostess to seat him. He doesn't look like he belongs here." That last sentence stung Tatiana, though she tried to keep her reaction steady. He was at the door, and all the hostesses were busy. He asked for a seat, so I gave him one. I didn't think we'd deny someone just because of how they look. Crystal lowered her voice to a biting whisper. "You know our policy. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone who might disturb other patrons. The dinner rush is peak time for paying customers. People like him can drive them away." Tatiana wanted to protest. She wanted to exclaim that there was no visible disruption. Michael had quietly eaten his meal without bothering anyone. Instead, she measured her words carefully. "He's not causing any trouble. He's just having dinner." Crystal pressed her lips into a thin line. "I'll be watching. If there's any problem, I'll hold you personally responsible." With that, the manager walked away, leaving Tatiana trembling slightly with anger and frustration. She paused to steady her breathing. She knew from experience that standing up to Crystal was akin to painting a target on her back. Her job was too important to risk losing over a single disagreement, no matter how principled. Yet in her heart, she would do it again. Providing a hot meal to someone in need was worth the risk. Unbeknownst to Tatiana, that fateful decision was about to reshape her destiny. Michael quietly savored every bite of his spaghetti, seemingly lost in thought, as he occasionally glanced at Tatiana from across the room. In those moments, a sense of respect and admiration flickered across his face. Shortly after he finished, Tatiana came by to check on him. "How was everything?" she asked, trying to appear casual while scanning the floor for Crystal. The manager was nowhere in sight. Michael rubbed his hands on the napkin, his eyes warm with gratitude. "Delicious. Best meal I've had in quite some time. Thank you for going out of your way." She noted the dryness in his voice, as though quite some time meant more than just skipping a meal or two. Before she could speak, he continued. "You've been very kind to me, and you didn't have to be. You didn't judge me." Just then, Crystal materialized from behind a column with the swiftness of a hawk diving for prey. Her glare pinned Tatiana in place. She stepped forward, ignoring Michael completely, and addressed Tatiana. "We need to talk. Now." Michael rose slightly in his seat, concerned. "Is something wrong?" Crystal's stare bored into him for a moment, then returned to Tatiana. "It's a matter of restaurant policy," she said curtly. "Management only. Let's go." Tatiana shot Michael an apologetic look, then followed her manager to the kitchen corridor. A low, humming tension hung in the stale air. The clattering of dishes in the dishwasher, the hiss of pasta water, and the shouts of line cooks formed an incongruous background to Crystal's cold fury. Crystal spoke in a hiss. "How many times have I told you we don't let vagrants in here? What if he can't pay? Did you think about the kind of crowd we're drawing? Families with kids, couples looking for a quiet dinner. This is not a homeless shelter." Tatiana's hands shook, but she tried to keep her voice composed. "He's not causing any disturbance. I made sure he could pay with a gift card. And even if he was short on the bill, I was willing to cover it myself." "That's not the point," Crystal snapped. "This is a business, not a charity. I don't care how you slice it. You can't just do whatever you want. You have to adhere to company standards." Tatiana's eyes blazed. "What standard says we can't feed a hungry person who is able to pay or be covered?" Crystal's lips curled. "Are you really going to argue with me? Maybe you'd be happier working in a soup kitchen if that's your life mission, but not here. This is a profitable franchise with brand guidelines. We can't risk letting a certain element overrun the place." Tatiana swallowed her anger. A small voice inside her reminded her of the many nights she had watched her grandmother struggle to put food on the table. If a kind neighbor or a caring stranger hadn't stepped in at times, she and her grandmother might have ended up starving too. She felt tears threaten the corners of her eyes, but held them back, determined to stay strong. "Understood," she finally said. "I'll wrap up his service and he'll be leaving soon." Crystal scowled. "Make sure he leaves, and next time remember your place." With that, the manager stormed off, leaving Tatiana alone in the corridor. She took a slow, shaky breath, calming the whirlpool of conflicting emotions raging inside her. Duty warred with compassion. Job's stability clashed with empathy. In the end, she straightened her apron, turned on her heel, and headed back to the dining area. The only solace she found was in Michael's subtle nod of gratitude as she approached his booth. She placed the check in front of him, though with the gift card it showed a very minimal balance. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Thank you for coming. I hope everything was all right." Michael studied her face with clear concern. Slowly, he slid the gift card and a few extra bills toward her. It was more than enough to cover the tip, unexpectedly generous for someone who seemed to have come in with almost nothing. "I don't mean to cause trouble," he said softly, "and I appreciate everything." "Not your fault," she whispered. "I'm just glad you got a good meal." She forced a smile. "Please take care of yourself." Michael rose, picking up his jacket. He hesitated for a moment, as though he wanted to say something else, but the words never came. Finally, he nodded and walked out the door, dissolving into the night. Tatiana felt a strange pang of emptiness as he left, unaware that the next time she saw him, nothing would ever be the same again. The restaurant began winding down around 11 p.m. By the time Tatiana finished bussing her last tables, her feet ached from hours of standing and nerves frayed from the confrontation with Crystal. She clocked out and retrieved her purse from the staff room, hoping to avoid any final run-in with her manager. But fate wasn't on her side. As she rounded the hallway leading to the exit, she found Crystal waiting for her arms crossed, posture rigid. One look at Crystal's face confirmed that something serious had transpired. "Tatiana," she said coolly, "I've been informed by one of the hostesses about what happened with that man you brought in. You went directly against my orders." Tatiana felt her temper flare. "I didn't go against your orders. The man was simply waiting, and you never told me not to seat him before he came in. He was a paying customer." Crystal's jaw clenched. "You're insubordinate. I warned you. This is a corporate matter now. We have standards and guidelines about who we serve. If we open ourselves to every street person who wanders in, it will tarnish our brand." At this, Tatiana couldn't hold back. Brand guidelines that say we can't serve someone because of how they dress? That's discrimination. Crystal's eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped to an icy rasp. "You can call it what you like. But you are done here, Tatiana. I'm terminating your employment effective immediately. Return your uniform and get out. And don't expect any good references from me." A chill shot through Tatiana. She froze, stunned by the news. Fired. For serving a hungry man. A meal he paid for with a gift card. She fought to keep her voice from shaking. "You can't be serious. I need this job. I have Crystal cut her off. Don't make a scene. We have your final check. HR will mail you the paperwork. Now leave before I have security escort you out." For a moment, the world felt like it had slipped out from under her feet. She thought of her grandmother's hospital bills, the rent that was already overdue, and the meager savings she carefully guarded. Then the white-hot anger of betrayal burned through her veins. But she knew better than to stand there and argue with someone who held all the power, at least for now. As tears of humiliation threatened to spill, Tatiana mustered what dignity she could. She unclipped her name tag, placed it on Crystal's desk with trembling hands, and forced herself to walk out. The walls of the Olive Garden she had served faithfully for 3 years seemed to loom around her, judgmental and silent. She pushed through the glass doors into the cool night air, her breath ragged with shock. The restaurant sign's neon glow flickered overhead, an indifferent witness to her ousting. Tatiana slept little that night. She got home to her cramped apartment and found her grandmother Yvonne still awake. The older woman's face was lined with concern as soon as Tatiana walked in, and it only grew deeper when Tatiana explained what happened. "Oh, my sweet girl," Yvonne whispered, pulling her into a gentle hug. "I know you relied on that job, but I'm proud of you for not turning away that man. The Lord has a plan for all of us." Tatiana fought back tears. She didn't want to worry her grandmother further. "I'll figure something out," she whispered, though anxiety gnawed at her. Job hunts were difficult, especially in the midst of an economic slowdown. Restaurants hired by the dozens, but churned through employees quickly. Crystal's threat not to provide a good reference also loomed in Tatiana's mind. What if managers at other eateries called her to verify her past work? Over the next few days, Tatiana pounded the pavement, distributing her resume across town. She went to local diners, coffee shops, hotels, any place that might be hiring. Some turned her away, others requested references. A handful scheduled interviews, and then ghosted her. Her savings withered as the overdue bills mounted, and she stared at her grandmother's supply of medication, worried about how long it could last. Friends reached out, offering small sums of money or leads on jobs. But each day ended the same, with a pit in Tatiana's stomach as she realized she was one day closer to empty pockets. Each night she prayed for guidance or a lucky break, or anything that would ease the panic in her chest. As the days turned into a week, hope began to fade. In the quiet hours before dawn, one morning her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She answered, bleary-eyed. "Tatiana Jackson," a deep male voice asked. "Yes." "Who is this?" she answered hesitantly. A pause. "Then I believe we met a few days ago." "My name is Michael." Her mind froze. Michael. The man she had served at Olive Garden. The man who appeared homeless, for whom she had risked her job. A swirl of mixed emotions rose inside her: relief, curiosity, confusion. "How did you get my number? You wrote it on the receipt. Remember, you wrote, 'Call me if you need any help.'" "Tatiana. I found it with the gift card after I left." Suddenly she remembered scrawling her number on the check in case Michael needed further help or resources. She'd done it discreetly in a small moment of empathy. "Oh yes," she finally said, collecting herself. I'm surprised you called. I wanted to check on you," Michael said quietly. "After I left the restaurant, I had a feeling you'd get in trouble for helping me. I'm sorry if that happened." Tatiana closed her eyes, the weight of her recent misfortune pressing down again. "I lost my job that same night. The manager fired me on the spot." A brief silence traveled across the line. Then Michael spoke carefully. "I'm sorry. That was never my intention. Would it be possible for us to meet for coffee? I have a proposition that might help you." Any other time, Tatiana might have been suspicious. But desperation and the memory of Michael's gentle demeanor guided her. "Coffee? Yes. That would be nice. There's a small cafe near my apartment called Madeline's. Do you know it?" "I'll find it," he said. They agreed to meet later that morning. Tatiana hung up, heart pounding. She didn't dare to imagine what help he could offer, but a spark of hope flickered, fragile yet persistent, in the darkness of her recent despair. Later that morning, Tatiana arrived at Madeline's cafe, wearing her neatest outfit, a simple blouse and dark jeans. She tried to tame her curly hair, though a few stubborn strands escaped. With anxious hands, she clutched her phone, scanning the modest dining area for Michael. She almost didn't recognize him when he arrived. Gone were the tattered jacket and worn jeans. He wore a crisp navy blazer, a light blue button-down, and well-fitted khakis. His hair was neatly combed, and he moved with a different aura, poised, self-assured, almost commanding. She stood up, nearly forgetting to breathe. "Michael." A warm smile lit his face as he approached. "Tatiana, good to see you again." He extended a hand. She grasped it, trying not to let her surprise show too blatantly. They both sat at a small corner table, the aroma of fresh coffee beans wafting around them. A waitress came by, took their orders, and left them alone. Tatiana couldn't hold back. "I have to admit, you look completely different from when we met." "May I ask?" Michael exhaled, leaning forward. "You're right to be curious. I owe you an explanation. The day we met, I wasn't exactly homeless. I was disguised, testing out a philanthropic project. I'm heading for the corporate side of the Darden Restaurants Group. You see, my real name is Michael Roth, and I'm the chief executive officer of a foundation that partners with various restaurant chains, including Olive Garden." Tatiana blinked, stunned. Her mind flashed back to the worn clothes, the uncertain posture. How could that have been the same man? The idea that he was connected to Darden, the parent company behind Olive Garden, made her heart race. Anger, confusion, disbelief, emotions crashed over her in waves. She managed a wry smile. You definitely disguised yourself well. Michael nodded. Sometimes, to see how staff and customers are treated at our franchises, we do undercover checks. I wanted to see what would happen if I showed up looking like someone who couldn't afford to pay. Usually the staff is polite but neutral. Some servers quietly ask me to leave or refuse to seat me altogether. Yet you broke protocol to help me, and I noticed it wasn't out of guilt or forced courtesy. It was genuine compassion. Tatiana's throat felt tight. Well, it got me fired. Crystal Bowman is quite strict. He nodded, his lips pressed together thoughtfully. I suspected as much. I followed up after I left, but you had already been let go. I spent the past few days sorting out what happened and going through the chain of command. I want you to know something I deeply regret, that your kindness cost you your job. She pushed a stray curl from her face, torn between gratitude for his concern and bitterness at the memory of her abrupt termination. I appreciate that, but now I'm unemployed, struggling to get by. I don't blame you, but it's been hard. Michael's gaze softened. I'm here to offer you something. A chance to get back on your feet. In fact, more than just that, a potential career opportunity. Tatiana felt her heart skip a beat. Career opportunity. He nodded. You see, I'm expanding my philanthropic efforts. I've launched a new initiative that focuses on job training, community outreach, and offering second chances to those who face hardship. We need people with integrity, empathy, and strong leadership potential to help manage and grow these programs. I believe you fit that description perfectly. She gaped, hardly believing her ears. You barely know me. All you saw was one act of kindness. It was more than an act. It was a reflection of your character. You risked a job you desperately needed just to ensure someone you thought was homeless could eat. That's rare, and that's exactly the kind of person we need driving these social initiatives. 1,000 questions swirled in her mind. She was partially thrilled, partially cautious. What would I have to do? Michael leaned back, crossing his arms thoughtfully. We'd start you with a position in our philanthropic division. Your role would involve coordinating with local shelters, establishing food outreach programs, and training restaurant staff on inclusive customer service. The pay would be significantly higher than what you earned as a waitress. You'd have benefits too. Tatiana's eyes welled up. She was overwhelmed. Her greatest hope was simply to find another waitress gig somewhere, just to keep paying for her grandmother's care. But this was an entirely different life path, a chance to make a real difference, leveraging her innate compassion and bridging the gap between corporate structure and community needs. I don't know what to say, she whispered, voice shaky with emotion. Michael reached out gently, placing a business card on the table. You don't have to decide this second, but I want you to join me on a short trip tomorrow. I'm visiting one of the local shelters that's applying for a grant from us. I'd like you to see firsthand the work we do, and maybe help me figure out how to improve it. Hope bubbled inside her. Without hesitation, she nodded. Yes, I'd love to go. Their coffees arrived then, and for the next hour, they discussed the program in more detail. With each word Michael spoke, Tatiana felt a new energy coursing through her. Something bigger than just a job was at stake. This was a mission that resonated deeply with her sense of empathy. She realized with a start that maybe losing her waitressing job was not the worst misfortune. Perhaps it was a door closing, so another more meaningful door could open. Early the next morning, Tatiana and Michael drove to the local shelter on the outskirts of town. The sun rose with a gentle warmth, washing the city in golden light. The old building's brick walls were weathered, but a large sign reading Tulsa Community Refuge stood proudly near the entrance. Michael parked his glossy black sedan, a stark contrast to the surroundings, and opened the passenger door for Tatiana. She inhaled the scent of fresh dew as she stepped out. A wave of nerves fluttered in her stomach. This was all so new, so daunting. "I don't want you to feel overwhelmed," Michael said, noticing her hesitation. "Just observe today. Talk to people if you can. I'd like to know your genuine impressions." He led her inside where the corridors bustled with staff, volunteers, and residents. Everything felt different from the polished floors and uniform ambience of Olive Garden. Here there was a rawness to life-worn chairs, scuffed walls, children running around ailing seniors in wheelchairs, mothers cradling babies, men searching for a moment of rest. Yet there was an undercurrent of hope, a sense of community that bound everyone together. Michael introduced Tatiana to the shelter director, a middle-aged woman named Rosa Martinez. Rosa's tired eyes lit up as Michael explained who Tatiana was and how she was exploring a possible role in philanthropic projects. "We need all the help we can get." Rosa said, her voice tinged with both weariness and resolve. "Our funding is stretched thin, and demand is always growing. We serve hot meals daily, but we're struggling to keep up with the costs. Expanding partnerships with restaurants or foundations would be a godsend." Tatiana's heart clenched, remembering the man from Olive Garden, Michael in his disguise, and how quickly a meal can change a person's day, or even their life. She walked through the cafeteria meeting volunteers who doled out oatmeal and coffee, greeting families and individuals who thanked them with humble gratitude. She met a young mother, Alexis, who juggled a toddler and an infant. Alexis had fled domestic abuse and found refuge here. "I just want to give my kids a better life," Alexis confided to Tatiana, tears shining in her eyes. "But it's hard to find a job without a permanent address. The shelter is trying to help me, but resources are limited." Those words struck Tatiana's core. She flashed on the day she lost her job, how quickly one's stability could evaporate. That mother's predicament was 100 times more precarious. Tatiana offered a warm smile and some encouraging words. But she left the conversation feeling the weight of how many people struggled like Alexis. By midday, Tatiana returned to Michael, who was busy speaking with the director. When he spotted her approach, he beckoned her over. "So what do you think?" he asked, gently. She exhaled. "It's eye-opening. There's so much need. People out there just trying to survive. It makes me realize how important it is to have programs that not only feed them, but also help them move forward, find jobs and rebuild their lives." Michael exchanged a meaningful glance with Rosa, who nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Which is exactly what we plan to do," he said. "In fact, we're considering an initiative to provide on-the-job training within restaurant branches, teaching job skills so people can transition out of shelters. It would require a strong liaison between the corporate side and places like this. Someone who understands the importance of compassion, yet can also navigate the business aspect." Tatiana's heart thumped. The role Michael described felt tailor-made to her experiences, yet she wasn't sure if she was qualified. She expressed as much worrying aloud about her lack of corporate experience or philanthropic background. Michael simply smiled. "Tatiana, I told you, we're looking for heart, determination, and integrity. We can teach you the technical side. You have a gift for caring about people. That's what matters. If you accept, I'd like you to lead the new local branch of this initiative in Tulsa." Her hands trembled slightly. Memories of her waitressing days flashed through her mind, lugging trays, smiling through petty customer complaints, all while trying to make ends meet. And here was a chance to do something greater, to use her compassion as a force for uplifting those who needed it most. She thought of her grandmother's words. "The Lord has a plan for all of us." She swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. "I'd be honored." By the following week, Tatiana had started her new position, immersed in orientation meetings and learning the ropes of grant writing, volunteer coordination, and staff training. She was astounded at how swiftly her life had changed from unemployed and distraught to hopeful and empowered. Yet a part of her still ached with resentment at how she'd been fired from Olive Garden. It was a story she kept close to her chest, unsure of how it would play out. Then the day came when Michael arranged a meeting that would stir up old ghosts. "We have to attend a corporate review session at Darden's regional headquarters," he told her. "All local Olive Garden managers will be there, including Crystal Bowman." Tatiana froze. Her stomach twisted at the thought of facing Crystal again. She had nightmares about that woman's cold stare, the humiliation of being so kicked out, the fear of not knowing how to pay her bills. But a spark of resolve cut through her discomfort. She wasn't the same person. She had a new role, and more importantly, she had a voice. The meeting took place in a sleek conference room high above the bustling city streets. Long glass windows framed the skyline, and plush office chairs lined a massive polished table. Senior management from various Darden franchises across the region gathered to discuss philanthropic outreach and store performance. Tatiana entered by Michael's side, her professional attire contrasting sharply with the waitress uniform she had once worn. Heads turned. Managers and executives eyed her with curiosity, some offering polite nods. She spotted Crystal near the middle, wearing a tailored suit, her blonde bob meticulously styled as usual. A flicker of recognition sparkled in Crystal's eyes when they landed on Tatiana, followed by a flash of shock. And was that fear or guilt? Michael wasted no time. Once everyone was seated, he began explaining his philanthropic initiative, highlighting the success stories from pilot programs in other states. Tatiana was then introduced as the new community outreach coordinator for Tulsa, tasked with bridging the gap between local restaurants and community shelters. Polite applause followed, though the tension in the room spiked like static electricity. Tatiana stood, her voice slightly trembling at first, but she steadied it with determination. She explained the plans to implement job training for shelter residents, create inclusive dining guidelines for all guests regardless of appearance or income, and host fundraising events where partial proceeds would support local shelters. While most attendees listened attentively, a few shot uncertain glances at one another. Then Tatiana caught Crystal's eye. The woman's posture was rigid, her expression carefully neutral. After the presentation, there was a Q&A session. Some managers asked about budget logistics, others about scheduling. Finally, Crystal stood, crossing her arms. "I see the merit in a philanthropic approach," she said slowly, addressing the room. "But we have to be mindful of potential problems. If we open our doors too widely, we risk attracting customers who can't pay, or who disrupt the dining experience for families. We are a business after all." Tatiana's heart hammered. She recognized those words, the echo of the conversation that cost her a job. But this time, she had a platform and an ally in Michael. Summoning her courage, she responded calmly. "With all due respect, Ms. Bowman, our research suggests that inclusive dining does not negatively impact revenue. In fact, many customers appreciate ethical practices. They support businesses that treat all patrons with dignity." Crystal's gaze flicked to Michael, perhaps hoping for support. But Michael merely arched an eyebrow. She pressed on. That may be so, but the day-to-day reality is more complicated than theoretical research. We need absolute clarity on policy. Michael's voice resonated through the silence. The policy is compassion and respect for every guest. A genuine welcome, not superficial. We will not refuse service based on appearance or presumption. Is that clear enough? Murmurs rippled across the room. Some managers nodded clearly, understanding the top-down mandate. Crystal's face reddened as she realized she was outnumbered and outranked. She forced a tight smile. "Crystal clear, sir." Tatiana felt a rush of satisfaction, but it was tempered by memories of the abrupt humiliation she'd endured. Still, she reminded herself that her purpose now was bigger than personal vendettas. She had to help push forward policies that would prevent others from being mistreated like she was. After the meeting, managers and staff trickled out. Tatiana lingered, gathering her presentation materials. Michael chatted with a few senior executives, leaving her momentarily alone. She stiffened as Crystal approached her heels, clicking ominously on the polished floor. "Tatiana," Crystal said, voice subdued. "I was surprised to see you here." Tatiana forced a polite smile. "So was I. Life can be full of surprises." Crystal's face flickered with a mixture of annoyance and awkwardness. "Look, you have to understand. I was just following corporate guidelines." Tatiana held up a hand, cutting her off. "Let's not rehash it. What's done is done. I lost my job, and that's over. Now I'm in a position to help ensure others aren't treated the way I was." A faint flush crept into Crystal's cheeks. She opened her mouth as if searching for a retort, but none came. Instead, she gave a curt nod, then turned and walked away. Tatiana watched her go, uncertain if she felt closure or lingering anger. Perhaps both. In the weeks that followed, Tatiana plunged wholeheartedly into her new responsibilities. She organized seminars for restaurant staff, teaching them ways to handle diverse customers compassionately. She facilitated donation drives at Darden's establishments across Tulsa, raising funds and awareness for shelters like the one she'd visited. She also led orientation sessions for residents eager to learn restaurant skills, collaborating with managers who signed on to the program. Word spread fast. The Compassionate Dining Initiative, as it came to be called, sparked positive media coverage. Local news channels interviewed Tatiana, focusing on her story as the waitress who had once been fired for helping someone in need and was now championing corporate inclusivity. Social media buzzed with praise, highlighting Olive Garden's willingness to embrace philanthropic values, though some netizens ferreted out rumors of the manager who had fired her. Behind the scenes, Michael informed Tatiana that corporate leadership had launched an internal investigation into the policies that led to her firing. And then a final twist of karma appeared in the form of an official letter. Crystal Bowman was removed from her post as manager of that downtown Olive Garden. Tatiana only learned of it when a co-worker from her old job sent a text. "You won't believe this, Crystal is gone. Corporate forced her to resign. People say your new initiative was the last straw that exposed her discriminatory behavior." At that moment, Tatiana felt a wave of relief. Not happiness for someone losing their job. She would never wish unemployment on anyone. But relief that no one else would suffer under Crystal's rigid, callous leadership. It felt like the universe had balanced the scales. As the weeks rolled on, Tatiana's life blossomed in ways she never could have imagined. With her new role as community outreach coordinator, she found herself not only employed, but leading change. Her work was meaningful, rooted in empathy, and fueled by her desire to make sure no one else endured the kind of humiliation she had suffered. Each day brought new challenges, organizing food drives, collaborating with shelter directors, training restaurant staff on inclusive service. But Tatiana embraced them with a fresh sense of purpose. She spearheaded fundraising campaigns that generated thousands of dollars, enough to restock pantry shelves, provide emergency housing stipends, and expand job training programs. Slowly but surely, she helped lay the foundation for a more compassionate bridge between the corporate world and the underserved communities in Tulsa. Her finances finally began to stabilize. For the first time in months, Tatiana was able to breathe. She caught up on overdue bills and set up a dedicated home care schedule for Yvonne, ensuring her grandmother received daily attention and medication management from a trusted nurse. No more scrambling after double shifts or rationing groceries. There was food in the fridge and security in her future. One quiet evening, Tatiana returned home after a long but fulfilling day. The soft scent of lavender drifted through the apartment as she opened the door. Yvonne, wrapped in a cozy knitted shawl, smiled from her favorite armchair. "You look tired, baby," she said warmly, beckoning her over. "But I can see that spark in your eyes. You're glowing." Tatiana sank to the floor beside her, resting her head on Yvonne's knee. "I still can't believe all this is happening. Just a few weeks ago, I was jobless and scared. Now I'm meeting with executives, running programs, even getting interviewed on the news." Yvonne chuckled softly, stroking Tatiana's hair. "And to think it all started because you chose kindness. That one man, that one act. See what the Lord can do when you follow your heart." Tears pricked at the corners of Tatiana's eyes, but she smiled through them. "You always said compassion is never wasted. I guess I finally understand what that really means." Yvonne's voice grew tender. "You've become a blessing to so many, Tati. You're walking in your purpose now, and I've never been prouder." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence filled with love and gratitude. Outside, the Tulsa sky turned a dusky shade of lavender, like a canvas painted with hope. Later that night, Tatiana sat at her small writing desk, flipping through pages of her old Waitress schedule. Reminders of late-night shifts, thankless tasks, and dreams she thought would never bloom. She smiled wistfully and placed the pages into a folder labeled Past. It was time to close that chapter for good. Instead, she opened her laptop and pulled up the newest project proposal for expanding the Compassionate Dining Initiative to nearby cities. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment as she whispered to herself, "Let's do more." Because for Tatiana, the journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. A few months later, Tatiana found herself walking through the old Olive Garden doors once again, this time as an invited guest for a special event. The new manager, a jovial man named Marcus, had arranged a thank you luncheon for all the staff who had participated in the Compassionate Dining Initiative. Tatiana stepped inside, memories rushing back of the day she was fired in this very lobby. But everything felt different. Marcus greeted her warmly, leading her to a festive table laden with appetizers and drinks. Waiters scurried about, but this time they wore smiles that seemed genuine, and they occasionally gave Tatiana grateful nods for her philanthropic work. She mingled, meeting new employees and hugging old friends. The tension once thick in the air was gone, replaced by an atmosphere of camaraderie and inclusivity. Even the hostess stand boasted a new policy sign that read, "We welcome you as you are." Near the end of the luncheon, Marcus tapped a spoon against a glass to get everyone's attention. He beckoned Tatiana to the front. "We want to acknowledge Tatiana Jackson," he said, voice ringing with genuine appreciation. "She showed us that compassion is good business and that a single act of kindness can change lives. We're proud to support her initiative and be part of something bigger." A wave of applause broke out. Tatiana swallowed hard tears, pricking her eyes. She felt for the first time fully recognized and validated by the very place that once cast her out. The applause thundered as she made her way up to thank Marcus. She held the microphone with slightly trembling hands, smiling at the sea of faces turned toward her. "I never expected this." She began, her voice strong despite the swirl of emotion in her chest. "But I realized something powerful kindness can set us on a path we never dreamed was possible. I'm grateful to Olive Garden and the Darden Group for embracing the Compassionate Dining Initiative. Together we can make sure no one feels unwanted or unwelcome when they step through these doors." Another round of applause erupted. Tatiana's gaze swept over the crowd, and in that moment, she felt the final puzzle piece click into place. She had come full circle from a fired waitress to a champion for the marginalized. The obstacles she endured, the pain she felt, now served as the foundation for an even greater purpose. And though the wounds of her firing would never fully vanish, they had transformed into a source of strength, fueling her commitment to empathy and justice. After the applause subsided, she stepped away, letting the staff continue their celebration. In her heart, she silently thanked the twist of fate that brought Michael through that door, disguised and in need of a simple act of kindness. Karma had indeed come knocking, punishing those who chose cruelty, and elevating those who dared to act with compassion. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster journey of compassion, betrayal, and sweet, sweet karma. Tatiana's life changed forever when she extended kindness to a stranger, only to discover he was no ordinary customer. Her firing at Olive Garden paved the way for a twist of fate that would empower her to transform countless lives. In the end, karma struck back at those who acted out of greed and prejudice while rewarding the courage it takes to stand up for what's right. If this story inspired you, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more eye-opening, heart-stirring tales that showcase the power of empathy and resilience. Let's spread the message: never underestimate a single act of kindness. It could change a life, reveal hidden opportunities, or even turn you into a hero in someone else's story. Until next time, stay compassionate and stay hopeful.